This is the first of what I hope will become an ongoing series where we take a look at each position on the Clemson football team and do a bit of a preview, but more of a look at the newcomers to the position. Now, that includes incoming freshmen, players coming off redshirt, as well as transfers in at least a couple spots on the roster finally for the first time. And so we're going to start with running back. I think that's probably the most interesting position to do this on. So let me pull this up and give a quick breakdown, then we'll talk through it. So Phil Mafah is obviously the guy leaving. Only one guy, but it's a pretty impactful one. Mafah actually ate up 70% of the carries by scholarship running backs, at least, which is a big change because before that, it was kind of a two-headed monster. You had Will Shipley, you had Phil Mafah, and so it was pretty balanced. Both could stay healthy, but this last year, they leaned really heavily on Mafah, and I don't know if it necessarily resulted in the shoulder injury, but it certainly didn't help. Whether it was the shoulder injury, the workload, or the kind of the combination, one causing the other, he was pretty ineffective at the end of the year. He had just 13 carries for 2.2 yards per carry in the ACC championship game, and it was pretty clear it was because he was hurt. But they were still very hesitant to turn it over to other players, even though I think to us watching, who don't see the practice, was obvious that you needed to turn it over. But the trust didn't seem to be there. Jay Haynes only got 3 carries, and part of that was because he was looking good, but then he tore his ACL on the kick return. And so they didn't really have anyone else they could go to that they really trusted. And that was pretty evident when you got to the college football playoff. You still had Keith Adams and Jarvis Green, but they didn't give him many carries. They actually moved Adam Randall to running back with just bowl practice to get ready. They moved him over, and Adam Randall had still only 4 carries, but more than anyone else, he had 44 yards. He looked really good as the running back. Before we talk about Randall, though, I do think that does speak to a lack of trust they had in the other guys, that they felt it was necessary to move a wide receiver over, not in the offseason, but immediately, because they didn't want to go with the guys who they had. But Randall, I think, is actually, I'm pretty high on him. He's gotten a lot of hype before his freshman year, sophomore year, and his junior year. A lot of hype, but I never really bought into it. He's 6'2", 225, but he doesn't get open. He always struggled to get separation. He's just not, doesn't have that. I don't know if it's the top line speed or what it is, but he never really got separation and got open. And that's a pretty big weakness to have as a wide receiver. The few times he did get open and got the ball and had a little space, he would do something with it, though. And so that's why I think when you just hand him the ball and let him work in space, I think it could be really successful. He was also a particularly good blocker for a wide receiver, which is obviously easier to block a cornerback than it is to block, linebackers or defensive ends, zipping in to sack a quarterback. Different, but encouraging. Like I said, he's 6'2", 225. He's not a smaller guy. He was a good blocker as a receiver. I think he could figure that out. And so I'm actually pretty high on what Adam Randall can do. Certainly gives the room, maybe not a high floor because it's still a new position for him, but some veteran leadership at bare minimum. And I'm pretty optimistic. Now, his 2 biggest threats for playing time, or 2 guys who could eat into it, I think, are 2 freshmen. One of them is David Eziomume. He's coming off of a redshirt year, and he was not a huge recruit per se, but a guy who was kind of viewed as, CJ Spiller found a gem. This guy's a track star from North Cobb in suburban Atlanta. He could end up being an incredible find, and I was pretty high on him and thought that maybe he could get a lot of carries and sort of be the backup for Mafah, but he ended up redshirting. And so we'll see if he's ready. I've heard that he had to figure out some things in terms of both pass blocking and ball security. But if he's got those figured out, his athleticism is pretty darn good. I think it's better than some of the guys who are returning to the room. And so I think he has a real shot to make an impact and really shoot up the depth chart. The other guy who's going to get a lot of excitement is Gideon Davidson. Gideon Davidson is a true freshman, not a redshirt. But he's a guy who he's a track star. His 100 meter, comparing his time to other athletes, was really impressive. He's got great speed, and we're hearing that now from spring camp, that he just looks physically mature and also is picking up the playbook and figuring things out. Obviously, there's going to be a learning curve with pass blocking, probably more so for him than Adam Randall. At least Adam Randall's been in college for a while. But I was really high on Davidson when he committed, and now we're sort of getting validation of that, hearing it in camp. So I think he's a guy If you think back to 2017, when ETN was a freshman, ETN did not start immediately. He was getting kind of garbage time carries and looking incredibly explosive with fresh legs late in games. Maybe we see that with Gideon Davidson early against LSU. Maybe he doesn't get a ton of carries against LSU, but he has a couple that look pretty good. And then against Troy, he looks really good. And then he starts getting more and more. And by the end of the year, he's getting the most. I think that's a very viable way this plays out for him or David Eziomume. I think either one of those could happen. But I think that gives you a veteran in a new position, 2 talented freshmen. I think you feel pretty good about that. They won't all pan out, but I think at least 2 are guys that are going to work out for Clemson. And then Jay Haynes tore his ACL, like I mentioned, in the ACC championship game. So if it's a 9-month recovery, that puts him coming back in early September, which would be right after LSU. Does he come back at 100%? Does he need a few weeks? He's not participating in spring camp. I'm guessing it's more of a mid-season thing that he ends up starting really getting carries, but we'll see if he's behind those freshmen. If those freshmen are clicking right away, maybe it's hard for him to really move up the depth chart, but that gives you a 4th guy. And then you're going back to Keith Adams Jr. and Jarvis Green. Those are guys who, if I'm being candid, were recruits I was not high on at the time that they committed. They haven't really done anything to change my opinion, but in this new world with 105 scholarships, that's not really a big problem to have depth guys. You're not so crunched for scholarships that you need major contributions from every guy. If they can contribute on special teams, that is certainly welcome. And then let's look at how the revenue sharing affects this football team, because I think it's a big part of how you look at every position and every kind of breakdown. So I mentioned there's 105 scholarships now, or not even scholarship. They are scholarships, but there are more roster spots because there's no more walk-ons. And so when you look at how many running backs there are, you could have so many running backs that we just went through, and that's fine. You have a much bigger roster now. And when you look at the amount of money that this is going to be spread out across these guys, I think this was some good perspective. I did a little math. You have $20.5 million to spread out across all athletes as you so choose. I think they will, and I think they should give it all to football and basketball. So I did some math and said, what if you pay every roster slot and on both basketball and football the same on average? Obviously, the star quarterback is going to get more than the 5th best running back. But if you just average it out and say, how much would you get across these 120 total roster spots? It comes out to almost $171,000, which is a pretty good living, right? Again, that 5th running back might get 20 grand. And the star running back might get $500,000, right? I don't know exactly how that part's going to work, but this is the high level math. Works out that there's about $171,000 for each of them. Now, if you pay basketball roster slots and football roster slots the same, that would have you giving 87.5% to football, 12.5% to basketball, which makes sense to me, given how much more revenue football brings in. They certainly deserve, right? They deserve more as a program, but then they have so many more roster spots in total to generate that revenue. So this, I think, is pretty close to what we'll see. They might give a little bit more to football than this. This is what I would like to see. I don't want basketball to be handicapped because I do care a lot about basketball, even though football is, certainly the flagship of Clemson. But I think this was good perspective. Before we get out of here, just some closing thoughts on the running backs. I'm not down on this. I'm not down on this group at all, actually. I am more excited than I expected to be about what Adam Randall could do. He's got to learn the pass blocking. He was a good blocker on the outside. It's a different, much more challenging task at a running back, but I think he's capable. It was a strength for him as a wide receiver. He's not small. I think he's capable. We've seen him in space once he's got the ball and he doesn't have to run a route, or he's done running the route and he has the ball already. He's pretty good in that spot. So hand him the ball, see what he could do. And then he's got to be good. And Clemson's really going to rely on him early in the year. But as the year goes on, I think at least one of Eziomume or Gideon Davidson, I think at least one of those 2 emerge. And then you've got enough depth behind them with Jay Haynes returning with the other guys that I think the room could be at worst okay as the year goes on, even if it struggles early. But I actually think it could be really good if Adam Randall works out as well as I think he will, and if at least one of these freshmen displays the upside that I know they have. I think it could actually be a strength. So it's probably the hardest to predict. It's probably the one with the widest variance. They could be kind of bad, particularly bad in the year, particularly early in the year. But I also think they probably will be good, especially by the end of the year. So it's the most interesting room, I think, to preview, and that's why I started here. Let me know what you think in the comments. Who's going to have the most carries? Let me know in the comments there. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I really appreciate it. And go Tigers.